Hello friends, thanks for joining me today. This is Catherine from Research Rockstar, and today I'd like to talk about career planning. Now is a great time to be doing some career planning, and it can be a great idea sometimes to just sort of step back from the treadmill of work and deadlines and think about your 2 or 3 or even 5-year career goals. So let's start there. Take a minute and let's talk about, do you have a clear vision of what kind of work you want to be doing a year from now? In an ideal world, what would you like your market research and insights career to look like? What does your day look like? Or maybe even go farther. Be a little bold and try to come up with a 5-year vision of what you want your career to look like. Now, I know it can be hard. You know, if you think about the kind of work you want to be doing, the kinds of colleagues that you might like to be working with, what kind of skills you hope to be using, whether it's 1 year from now or 5 years from now, it can be a little bit challenging. So if you're not really sure about what your career vision is over the next few years, don't worry, we can start easy at the highest level. So at the very highest level, we should be thinking about our career as potentially falling into a couple of different categories. And that starts with this question. In an ideal world, are you going to be a market research and insights generalist or a specialist? Let's define these two things. First of all, a generalist in any profession, of course, is somebody with a broad set of knowledge. We might say that they have knowledge of multiple topics, and that can often make them a valuable advisor. Within the generalist category, in the world of market research and insights, it typically falls into two types of roles that are really different but increasingly intersecting. And the first role is that of the market research and insights generalist, someone who can map a specific business need to an appropriate selection of qualitative or quantitative research methods, often using one or more of customer data analysis, ethnography, focus group research or online focus groups, in-depth interviews, other types of online qualitative methods, surveys, of course, social media listening, maybe third-party data analysis. So the market research and insights generalist may have domain knowledge about a wide variety of data sources and methodologies. Another kind of generalist, though, that's increasingly important, and we've talked about this in a few past episodes, is what I call the data agnostic advisor. That's the person who knows about a lot of different things and is not biased towards any particular one of them. And with the data agnostic advisor, or as McKinsey likes to call them, translators, this is somebody who has a high degree of knowledge about the business side. So you've got to have that ability to understand the strategic initiatives, the priorities, the business processes, so that you can then map them to a wide variety of data sources and methodologies in a very unbiased way. So having expertise in a wide range of data sources and analytics applications is really important. Now, that data agnostic advisor doesn't have to know hands-on in detail how to do all of the different methodologies and analytics applications, but they need to know enough to know when to recommend them. So that means knowing enough to know A, what they are, and B, their various pros and cons. So there's a really big difference between these two types of generalist roles, but they both have value and they both exist in the real world. Now let's define a specialist. A specialist is somebody who has a primary area of focus. They're highly skilled, they have demonstrably higher than typical level of knowledge. Let's use an example of a survey researcher, because survey research is a specialty if it's done with rigor. And if you're going to say that you're a survey research specialist, rigor is key. There's a lot of research on how to do questionnaire design and data analysis correctly so that you get the best possible data quality. So you can't call yourself a survey specialist if you don't know about that sort of stuff. So a survey research specialist is going to know, based on research and best practices, about sampling and scales and constructs and techniques for mitigating known sources of bias in self-reported data. So this person knows more than most people know about surveys. They are a credible qualified specialist. Now, in reality, we could define a specialist in market research and insights in many ways. Some of us know this from people we know. For example, you might know a market researcher who specializes in studying specific groups of people. Maybe they specialize in business to business research, or maybe they specialize in consumer research, but they specialize on a specific generation or cultural group or geography, etc. So there are a lot of different ways of defining specialists. However, it is a specific commitment. Now, I will say this. A cynical point of view would be to cast the generalist as a jack of all trades and master of none, or to maybe say that the specialist risks being a one-trick pony. I think that's a really cynical way of looking at things. Both paths have their pros and cons, and both paths have specific types of opportunities. The generalist, especially the translator, may have more career advancement options than most specialists. That's a brutal reality. So if you're somebody who really cares about advancing through an organization, you want to become a director and then a vice president, you're looking for an executive path perhaps, then you're probably going to be better off with a generalist role. No surprise there. However, specialists can sometimes command a very high salary. If you have a specialty that is in demand, that can be a really great way to differentiate yourself, and sometimes specialists do earn a very high salary. And if you're finding it hard to understand how both generalist and specialist roles are actually valued in the workplace, just take a look at the highest paying jobs in the United States overall. Business Insider recently published their list of the highest paying jobs in the United States. This was in August of 2018. I'll post a link in the show notes here. And in it, what you'll see is both a nice mix of both highly specialized jobs and more generalist jobs. So even in the broad world of careers outside of market research and insights, we do see that there is significant demand for both specialty jobs and generalist jobs, and both can be quite lucrative. So, both, it really is an important choice. So if both roles have interesting potential, if either being a generalist, however you want to define it, or being a specialist, however you want to define that, has interesting career potential, how do you decide what path is best for you? Well, does one path clearly speak to you? As I've been talking, has there been an obvious direction for you? Does the generalist role really resonate, or does the specialist role really resonate? If something is resonating with you, that is fantastic. That's definitely something worth exploring. I really do believe in my gut in terms of things related to life goals, personal things, right? If something's really resonating, even if I don't fully understand it yet, then I think that's something that is absolutely worth exploring. But if not, if it's not really clear, don't worry. It can be a hard thing to decide which way to go, especially if you're thinking about the changes that are going on in our profession. Given things that we've been talking here in this series about how organizations are changing, how they're structuring their market research and insights functions, and how there's so much more cross-functional collaboration with other data analytics functions, or if you're thinking about some of the new methodologies and technologies that are impacting our work, it can really create a bit of a conundrum for folks. Where would I be best? What's going to be the best way for me to leverage my own interests and superpowers? So it's a really big choice. Do you want to pursue the generalist path, or do you want to pursue a specialty path? Now, if you're feeling this is a big tug of war for you and you're having a hard time getting your head around it, I have a way to see if we can help you get some clarity. So we're going to do a little work now. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I want you to try to really think about this. Now, if as you're listening or watching this, depending if you're here on YouTube or here on iTunes, however you're participating in this episode, whether you can answer the questions now or later, because especially if you're in your car, don't get distracted, right? But I have a couple of questions I really want you to think about, whether you do it now or come back to this later. So the first question I have for you is this. In an ideal world, a year from now, will you be working as a generalist or a specialist? In an ideal world. And once you've made your choice, can you tell me why? Can you give me 2 specific reasons? You really articulate them. Say them out loud. Even if you're by yourself, say it out loud. There's something about saying it out loud, articulating it verbally that will help you get clarity and understand whether or not you have clarity on this. So, a year from now, will you be working as a generalist or a specialist? And can you articulate 2 specific reasons why that might be your ideal? Maybe one role feels more aligned with your personal superpowers, or one might sound more interesting. Maybe one strikes you as potentially being more creative and that might appeal to you. Or perhaps you just find that one is a better fit for your personality. Totally appropriate. Different people are going to have different choices. All right, so now you know your ideal and you know why, and now you have to ask yourself an important question, and you have to be brutally honest with yourself. Given your current skills and experiences today, would you describe yourself as a generalist or a specialist? If you're having a hard time, think about maybe your manager. How would your manager describe you? Would your manager describe you as a specialist or a generalist? And if you say that you're a mix of both, and I get it, there's definitely a lot of people who have that blend. Is really one more your superpower than the other? I mean, really think about it. Do you do better working as a generalist, or do you feel like you're doing your best work and really achieving your potential when you're working as a specialist? All right, so now that you've answered these questions, we know where we'd like to be and where you are now. So when you compare these 2 things, is there a big gap? And if so, that's okay. So if in an ideal world you are a specialist, but right now you are a generalist, that's your gap. But at least now we know that's the gap, and we can work towards that. We can resolve that gap over time once you've made that honest assessment and really done your gap analysis. Now, if you want to add a little twist, you could also ask about your clients or colleagues. How do they perceive you currently? And how would you like them to perceive you in the future? That can be a good way of doing a gap analysis too. That can kind of help you reveal to yourself what you would like to have, what perceptions you want people to have of you. That can sometimes be a good way also to get you to articulate what your gap is, if there is a gap. Now, asking these questions can reveal a lot of things. For some people, there will be no gap. You will realize you are a generalist, and that's what you want to be, and that's great. But for other people, it can be a little bit more work. Now, here's just a simple example. So here's a hypothetical example, loosely based on an actual Research Rockstar student. So you'll recognize yourself in this from a recent conversation. But in a hypothetical situation, I may have asked, in an ideal world, a year from now, would you be a generalist or a specialist? And let's call this researcher Jack. And Jack says, generalist. I really want to be that data translator. That's what resonates with me. That feels like it would align with my personal strengths and my interests. And why? Well, I want to stay with my current employer long term, and given recent changes in the company, I think the translator role would give me the best opportunities for advancement. Okay, practical assessment, a lot of loyalty to the current employer, maybe that, employer is a great place to work, fantastic. Reason number 2, I like the idea of working with both business team leaders and data analysis and research teams. I think it would be interesting and challenging in a good way. Fantastic. What a great, honest answer. Today, given your current skills and experiences, would you describe yourself as a generalist or a specialist? And hypothetical researcher Jack says, a specialist. I have experience with a few different methods, but most of my work is survey research. That's really where I am. Super honest, fantastic. So Jack's got a gap. He wants to be the data agnostic translator. He's currently a survey research specialist. There's a gap. It's not insurmountable. It just requires a little bit of planning. So here's what I would say. For those of you who are going through this process and thinking about career planning, it's a big process. This was just one simple step to get you started. If we can just get started with clarity on whether or not you want to become a generalist or a specialist, this can in of itself just help you to prioritize what some of your next steps may be for your career plan, so that you can really start to close that gap if you have one. Now, personally, I think there are a lot of exciting career opportunities for those of us in the market research and insight space. So there's lots of different ways to go. There's a lot of change going on, especially if you work in an organization that's really innovative and embracing change. So there are lots of opportunities out there. I am somebody, though, who does believe in planning, and as hokey as it sounds, I do believe that the best way to predict the future is to create it, so I want to make sure we're thinking about these things. Now, a couple of just resources for those of you who are thinking about these things. For those of you who are interested in being that data translator, please check out episodes 38 and 67 as a starting place. And you'll also get more information about McKinsey's translator role there, and a link to the Harvard Business Review article where they talked about that extensively. And for those of you who are looking to be specialists, I'll post some links for you folks here too. For example, for those of you who might be looking for a CX specialty, episodes 14, 16, and 52 would be good choices. If somebody's interested in being a market segmentation specialist, perhaps, episodes 54 and 61. If you have other specialties, I'll be posting a few different options in the notes below. And let me know what you think. I want to make sure that I am doing everything I can to help research rock stars like you advance in their careers. So I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Please do like and subscribe, or share this with others, or maybe even use this conversation as a lunch and learn for your team. Have a great day, and please do leave me comments. Thanks, everyone.